Reading is a hobby and a passion for many people. You can see the rise in popularity via BookTube, Bookstagram, and BookTok. Consuming this content leads to almost infinite book recommendations, both good and bad. However, for someone who pulled back on reading for large portions of their life, either due to school or work, the reality of FOMO can really seep in. Authors are influenced by books they read, and that influence can be seen in the books that they're writing as well. So, to curb my fear of missing out and get a better understanding of the precedent works of genres that I enjoy, I'm going to attempt to read books that I have so much FOMO about. It's driving me absolutely insane. Today we are actually starting off with The Clockwork Prince. I finished Clockwork Angel in my 24-hour readathon like months ago, and I did really enjoy it. You can see my review back then and my reactions or whatever. So this is set in London, and it is about 150 years, I think even more, before the Mortal Instruments series, which is the first 3 that I read, and then there's actually 3 more that you're supposed to read later. And I will link my reading order that I've seen. You can just I TikTok so many different reading orders to find out which order to read this. And the Mortal Instruments is set in New York. The Infernal Devices is set in London. This follows Tessa and Will and Jem, who are our main trio of characters, and there are a lot of other side characters that go along with them. They're around 15. I think the boys are like 17 years old. Tessa's from New York, Will is from Wales, and Jem is from Shanghai, and they all really are. It's kind of a found family of sorts. They all live in the Institute, which is this establishment. If you don't know, shadow hunters are a type of angelic imbibed being that they are able to have special abilities, and they go about and they essentially manage downworlders and all the magical goings on in the world. Downworlders are like vampires and werewolves and stuff, and whenever they do something wrong, shadow hunters are able to come in and kind of manage the situation. This one is interesting. It does have a few elements of like power that's being abused over time and like laws that change over time in terms of like how downworlders are supposed to be treated. There's something called the Accords, which is essentially like a peace treaty between shadow hunters and downworlders, and it kind of sets out all the rules as to how shadow hunters and other people are supposed to behave, and it's just like the rubric. And this is a time where those have been applied, but it does reference even earlier times, so that's kind of an interesting thing that you kind of see in this book. Anyway, there's an entire vocabulary and world that's really created in the first 3 books of the Mortal Instruments, which I already read. And now we're getting to a place where there's not as much world building, but there's more character building, and there's more like slow reveals. And then you get references of characters from different series that are kind of popping up, which is really interesting. And I know that like you have to finish this series before you finish, like you have to finish the Infernal Devices before you finish the Mortal Instruments. Otherwise there are spoilers. Like there are spoilers for the end of this series in the finale of the Mortal Instruments. Anyway, I'm excited to get into this one, and I have a few things I have to do today, like some cooking and a little bit of cleaning. I still have to make dinner, but we might have leftovers. I'm not particularly sure. And we have a few projects around the house. I did want to go to IKEA, but there is a storm brewing. Anyway, I'm gonna get into this, and I have a feeling I'm gonna read it quite quickly because I'm in one of those moods. Reading update. I am eating some very, very late lunch, and a storm is about to hit outside. You might be able to hear some of the thunder. And Clockwork Prince. It is the second book in the Infernal Devices series, the 5th book that I've read by Cassandra Clare, and it is my favorite up to this point. And I have heard that each book gets consecutively better. Slowly we're being revealed into what is happening. I'm enjoying it. The writing style is better than the first 3. The infamous incestual relationship that happens in the first 3 books, ignore it, keep moving forward. I definitely am guilty of watching terrible CW shows. So I did watch actually Shadowhunters years and years ago, and I feel really good that I'm getting through this. I'm really excited. I definitely went on Amazon and ordered a couple of the remaining books that I have left in the Shadowhunters world. It's like the Red Scrolls of Magic and the Book of the White. And I'm so excited to get through the Infernal Devices. I know this specific trilogy is many people's favorite trilogy out of the Shadowhunters series, and I really see why. The main protagonist character, I like her. I don't really like Clare in the Mortal Instruments series, but here in Infernal Devices, I really like Tessa much more than the others. She is a reader. She is quite a bit more self-aware. She's just not as naggy and annoying as Clare, in my opinion. Finally, I love these spines. I think they are so cool.
anyway, let's get more into it. And then just as an FYI, this is really the first time I've ever really enjoyed reading a love triangle. So that was kind of an interesting point. I know it's like supposed to be like the best one ever. So many people say that, but I've actually really enjoyed reading it here. This is what I want out of a YA book. It's definitely doing that. And the tension is still it's really fun to watch. It is just weird to watch 17-year-olds have these feelings, but I know those feelings are still real, even though they're almost like heightened and more intense. But you know, it's been a while since I've been 17. Since I've talked to you, I have actually finished the Clockwork Prince, loved it, and immediately jumped into the Clockwork Princess. And I think I'm about a little over a third of the way done, not yet, just like halfway, and I'm really enjoying it. I kind of wanted to go with the momentum and keep reading into the Infernal Devices. I'm really enjoying it. It's actually quite jam-packed with action scenes and excitement all the way through, at least what I've read up until now, and there hasn't been any like crazy reveals or anything like that. I mean, there's a couple, but I did accidentally read the back and I think it's got a spoiler. I think the last sentence has a spoiler because it says something that I don't really know just yet, so I'm a little frustrated about that. That was a bit silly. I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to rethink on that and come back to you. But I don't typically read the back of books. If it's something that I've heard of that's kind of a seminal or, you know, a little bit of an institutional YA fantasy, I kind of just go into it. Regardless, I definitely enjoy the setting of the early 1800s in London more than the early 2000s in New York, simply because I don't know if I like urban fantasy as much as older, more historic settings that really feel a little bit more immersive. There are a few paragraphs in here that I know Cassandra Clare really likes to reference real places at that time, and it just feels a little info dumpy, and it's not even in a way that's going to be informative for later. It's just for atmosphere. It actually took me out of the book a little bit because it's so sparse throughout. Like she has like, I think if she keeps it naturally weaved in, and then she had this one whole sentence where one of the main characters is traveling from one point to another. I don't want to tell you because it like has a little bit of spoiler, but he travels about like over 30 miles, let's say. And over those 30 miles, he's exiting one city, entering another city. And she ends up describing ad nauseum the things he passes, the historical impact. He's also going there under duress, like to do something that he's going there to save somebody. And he's doing that in a way that you'd think he'd be like kind of panicked and stuff. However, she makes it seem like he's sitting there and looking around and grasping the historical impact of the place that he's in, which is very possible, but is unlikely considering the emotional intensity of the situation and how he's trying to rush there to get there before something bad happens. So I didn't really like that part. Otherwise, I like the way that she's weaved in some like architectural features and some historical landmarks that existed at the time. So she did a little bit of research and then kind of like weaved it in. I'm gonna keep going reading this, and then I'm not sure if I'm gonna jump into the next chunk of Shadowhunters or the last half of the Mortal Instruments, or if I'm supposed to read the Red Scrolls of Magic next. And even that, I don't know if I'm gonna stay in the Shadowhunters world or jump to read something else. Like, I've got a few more that I need to get to, as I've talked about before. It is much later in the evening, and I am halfway through Clockwork Princess. I'm actually about to go get into bed and read more of this and like take off all my makeup and stuff, but I'm really excited to just come and give you guys a little bit of an update on this. At the halfway point, there's already been some pretty hard-hitting emotional stuff. There's not too much that I can actually say about what's going on because this is the third book in a trilogy. It's the sixth book that I've read in the Shadowhunters world, and there aren't necessarily spoilers for the first three here, but I don't want to spoil anything if you are interested in reading this. It is quite fun. You know, I keep thinking about the fact that I had FOMO and that I'm going back and reading these YA classics and really enjoying them at my ripe old age of 38, and they're still great. Like, I'm still having a time. It's definitely not the most interesting, it's not the most eloquent writing that I've ever read, but I still like it. It's still a good time. I'm still having fun. It's still relaxing. It's still bringing me back to a different time, and I like it. I think what makes YA isn't necessarily like the writing style. I think it's just the subject matter. It's the experiences that the main characters are having. These guys are figuring out the kind of people that they want to be and what morals are important to them, and it's a coming of age story for these three main characters, these three individuals in the story. There are certainly two that are more focused on. There is a love triangle. You don't really get the perspective though of all of them in equal value. There are some that really pop out more than the others, and so it kind of makes you, it almost intentionally makes you prefer one of the two love interests over the other, which I think it's almost like trying to direct you in one way, and I feel like there might be a bait and switch at the end in terms of like what ends up happening. However, there is a hostage situation right now, which is like really fun and like a little nerve-wracking, and so I'm reading that. I'm right in the middle of that right now, and so I'm gonna go to bed tonight and read for maybe like half an hour or so, try to fall asleep, and then I'll check in with you guys tomorrow morning when I've got a little bit more reading done. This is rough. It's been a bit of a hot second since I've updated you, and honestly, I don't really remember last thing I said, but I did finish Clockwork Princess, and I loved it. This epilogue, I didn't really know what to expect. I had heard some people that I follow on social media have really intense emotional reactions to it and really cry, and that it's like the longest epilogue that they've ever read, and oh my goodness, it is a tearjerker, and I don't think I've cried this hard in a book in a very, very, very long time. I do agree with a lot of the sentiments saying that this is one of the best love triangles that people have ever seen in a book, and I have to agree, for the like limited books that I have read, I've really enjoyed it. I was really surprised with like how much I loved this trilogy in comparison to the first three books of the Mortal Instruments. The Mortal Instruments, if you don't know, is it's the first three books of a 6-book series, and then this trilogy is actually recommended to be read right in the middle of it. The Mortal Instruments is a 6-book series, while the Infernal Devices is this 3-book series. They're both written by the same author, Cassandra Clare, who is incredibly prolific. They're all set in the same world, but just different timelines and different locations. The Mortal Instruments is set in early 2000s in New York City and follows the storyline of Clare as the main female protagonist, while in the Infernal Devices you follow Tessa, who is actually also originally from New York, but she travels all the way to London in the early 1800s, and you follow her storyline. Will and Jem are the two male protagonists in the story, and you really get to know them a lot. There is like a lean towards one of them in terms of the three throughout the 3 books, but you do love them both. I think that you can, obviously the people have preferences, but anyway, I love this book. I would have eaten this up in even more voraciously when I was younger. This is such a great book. I would have loved it when I was a teenager. Let's see now, when did it come out? 2013. I was no longer a teenager at that time. 2013, I was in my early 20s, I think, when this came out, and I definitely would have enjoyed it. But I don't think, I'm not upset about the fact that I didn't get to read it and that I got to really enjoy it now. And I would definitely recommend this trilogy. You definitely get a better sense of the world by reading the first 3 books of the Mortal Instruments. I keep saying Shadowhunters. I keep the Shadowhunters is the name of the entire world. Shadowhunters are descendants of a human that was imbibed with the blood of an angel,
and that's how they have their special abilities to be able to fight the downworlders and other demons. Downworlders are warlocks, vampires, werewolves, and there's essentially like a massive race war going on between all of them, and it's quite interesting. There's good and bad between fairies, and there's the world is massive, and there's all sorts of different perspectives, and there's all sorts of different types of people and types of creatures. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I definitely am going to continue reading. I'm definitely going to go back to the Mortal Instruments 6-book set. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be right away. I've just read 2 of these books in a row, and this is a series that I think I'm going to continue relatively slowly. I'm not sure. We'll see. Like, I actually think this is a 5-star read. I really loved it, and the way that it ended, really, I enjoyed it. It was very satisfying. It was emotionally gut-wrenching. This is everything I think a YA coming-of-age story could be. And I did like a lot of the references to literature. At the beginning of every chapter, there's a quote that felt, I don't know if, I understand why she did that, because 2 of the main characters in the book love to read, and they love poetry, and they whatever, and it's one of the ways that they bond. However, I felt like it felt it was a little forced, in my opinion. I think sometimes just like inserting quotes from classics and from poetry, I do think it, without context and without understanding what it's about, especially if this is for a YA, maybe people will know it because some of them are studying it in school, but I think without context, it kind of falls flat, to be completely honest. And I think especially if it's done every single chapter, I think it would be a little bit more hard-hitting if it was a little bit more choosy. And I feel like it might have been like the author's love letter to those pieces that she was referencing. I'm not sure. That's just my pick. I'm sure people know plenty more about this very well-loved world. And then I have started my next read, which is 6 of Crows. I did finish the Shadow and Bone trilogy earlier this year, and I enjoyed it. I have watched the TV show, unfortunately, first before reading this book, so I do have a visual of some of the characters. I'm only a few pages in, or like I'm 40 pages in, so I just really started it yesterday, and I do like it. I like the writing style. It is much more fast-paced than the Shadow and Bone trilogy. You can really see Leigh Bardugo has advanced as a writer. You can even see that throughout her Shadow and Bone trilogy. So I'm having a good time with this. I have a feeling I'm gonna fly through it. This is, as of right now, I have met 3 of the main characters, and my visual of them is definitely some of the characters from the show. And I have heard that people who love the books were really satisfied with the casting of the show. They were probably the best part of the TV show, to be quite frank. But right now we've met Kaz, who is I think 17 years old, and same with Inej. She's 17 and she has gymnastic and acrobatic abilities, and so she's able to like creep around. She's called the Wraith. To start from the beginning, you're following this band of misfits and found family, and as of right now, we've met Kaz, who is the untitled leader of a gang in Ketterdam, which is like a city. It's like an island like off the main continent where the Shadow and Bone trilogy took place. I'm not particularly sure in terms of where this falls in the timeline with the Shadow and Bone just yet. And so we have Kaz, who is a 17-year-old who grew up in the streets, and he finds out secrets about people that they're not willing to share, and ends up using that against them to make them do what he needs them to do. He's definitely built up this gang from the ground up, it sounds like, and then the leader is kind of sitting pretty at home. We've also met Jesper, who's a gunsmith and kind of his second in command, and then right now we've had one chapter in the perspective of Inej, and now we're jumping over to Kaz, and I'm curious if it's going to go between the 2 of them, or if it's going to jump around to the different characters that we're going to meet throughout this heist of a book. That's like the best thing that I've heard about it. It's found family, it's heist, and people love this and they fly through it, and I'm excited to get through this one, and I will probably want to read Crooked Kingdom right after, so we'll see, and I will update you guys when I get a little bit further into it. Now I am off to do a quick little workout and probably do some chores around the house, and then hopefully get back to this later. Taking a short break from 6 of Crows to head over for a nice evening walk at Disney Springs with my friend.
Taking a short with a friend. Wow, look at me getting an upgrade.
I just finished a pretty hard workout and actually feel pretty crappy, but I wanted to get immediately back to 6 of Crows because it's so good. I'm on page 433. I think I have one more chapter left. I'm like not even hopping into the shower because I want to read this so badly before I need to read it. I need to read it, and then I know that's gross, but I want to finish it. I love it. It's great. This is my rave review. So it is a little while later, and I realize I never actually filmed a conclusion to this reading vlog. I have completely finished reading Six of Crows and I adored it. The adventure, the found family, everything about it was, I think, impeccable. It is absolutely, definitely my favorite duology that I've read from Leigh Bardugo. I haven't read King of Scars, so it's technically the only duology that I've read. I do prefer it more than Shadow and Bone, which I'm really actually happy that I read. A lot of people say that you don't have to read Shadow and Bone before you get into Six of Crows, and I have to disagree with that. I think it is much more enjoyable to read Six of Crows when you've read the Shadow and Bone. Shadow and Bone sets up the world, you understand the rules, and then there are characters that show up in Six of Crows that are in Shadow and Bone. So after finishing Six of Crows, I immediately decided to read Crooked Kingdom, which there's no surprise there. I flew through it and absolutely loved it as well. I don't really want to say too much about it because it is the sequel to a duology and I feel like there will be significant spoilers, but you do continue following a lot of the characters from Six of Crows into here. One of my favorite parts about this duology is actually how much it diverted from the TV show, which I did watch before reading this. Some of the adventures that they go on, the locations are completely different in this duology than they are in the show. There's more action, I feel. There's more stuff that happens. The story is like a lot more developed, and I think it just makes a lot more sense because in the TV show what they did is they combined Shadow and Bone and the Six of Crows duology into one thing and they kind of merged the timelines, and this actually happens after Shadow and Bone. So there are references to the actions and the things that happen in Shadow and Bone here. There are characters that were in Shadow and Bone and afterwards are now here. Anyway, I'm really excited to read the next duology by Leigh Bardugo, which is the King of Scars and Rule of Wolves. And I know it's not rated as well as this. This is like the most beloved series she has. I know people love and hate Ninth House. Anyway, I loved it. I really recommend it. It's great. It's probably one of the best YA fantasy reads I have ever read. All right, and that really concludes this reading vlog. I read the last 2 books in the Infernal Devices series, which I absolutely adored. It is worth getting through the Mortal Instruments just to get through this. I still have 3 more books left in Mortal Instruments, but I'm going to continue reading Cassandra Clare. I think next up I've got the Red Scrolls of Magic based on the reading order that I found online, and definitely recommend these. This was such a great reading vlog because I had multiple 5-star reads. This is great. And then I also finished the Six of Crows duology, and I'm so happy that I did. I had so much FOMO not having gotten to these books, and there's still so many books that I have FOMO with that I really want to get to, things that I missed out on. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this reading vlog, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye-bye.